In the vast silence of space, where starlight takes centuries to reach its destination, there existed a truth that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The Galactic Assembly had ruled the cosmos for 15,000 years, a confederation of 237 species bound by ancient laws and older fears. Among these laws, none was more sacred than the Preservation Protocol, which forbade contact with emerging civilizations until they proved themselves worthy. For 300 years, humanity had been watched, studied, and quietly dismissed as another species destined to destroy itself before reaching the stars. But humanity had a gift for defying expectations. Commander Raven Blackwood sat in the captain's chair of the TCS Prometheus, humanity's first deep space exploration vessel, her fingers drumming against the armrest as she reviewed the latest intelligence reports. At 42, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every scar and every promotion through actual combat rather than political maneuvering. Her dark brown skin bore the faint marks of radiation exposure from her years piloting atmospheric fighters, and her close-cropped hair showed streaks of premature silver. She had lost her left eye in the Titan rebellion of 2247, and the cybernetic replacement glowed with a faint amber light when she was deep in thought. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission from the monitoring station," reported Lieutenant Jasper Kane from the communications console. He was young, barely 25, with nervous energy that made him constantly adjust his glasses even though they were surgically attached to his optic nerves. "Same frequency as before. They're still pretending we don't know they're watching us." Raven allowed herself a thin smile. The Velari observation post had been stationed at the edge of the Sol system for nearly 3 centuries, hidden behind a sophisticated cloaking field that would have been invisible to humanity's sensors just 50 years ago. But technology had a way of advancing faster than anyone expected, especially when a species was motivated by the knowledge that they were being judged by unseen eyes. "Let them watch," Raven said softly. "In fact, make sure they have a perfect view. Helm, adjust our course. Take us through the Kuiper Belt, nice and slow. I want them to see every detail." At the helm, Corporal Dmitry Volkov grinned, his thick beard unable to hide his excitement. He was a massive man, nearly 2 meters tall, built like someone who had grown up in heavy gravity even though he'd been born on Mars. His hands moved across the holographic controls with surprising delicacy as he guided the Prometheus through the scattered ice and rock of humanity's outermost frontier. "Course adjusted, Captain. They're definitely tracking us now. I'm picking up an increase in their scanning frequencies." "Good. Let them get curious." Raven stood and walked to the observation window, her boots making soft sounds against the deck plating. Beyond the transparent alloy, space stretched in every direction, infinite and cold. But it wasn't empty. Somewhere out there, hidden among the darkness, entire civilizations existed. Entire worlds that had dismissed humanity as primitive and violent, too dangerous to contact, too unstable to survive. They were about to learn how wrong they'd been. "How long until we reach the rendezvous point?" Raven asked. 17 hours, Captain, replied Lieutenant Commander Sienna Cross from the tactical station. She was tall and lean, with pale skin that seemed to glow under the bridge's blue-white lighting. Her fingers never stopped moving across her console, constantly monitoring the ship's defensive systems and the space around them. She had survived the attack on Europa Station, one of only 12 people to make it out alive, and she never let her guard down. The rest of the fleet should already be in position. The fleet. Even thinking about it made Raven's heart beat faster. For the past 30 years, humanity had been building in secret, using resources from the outer colonies, hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt, and technologies reverse-engineered from the faint signals they'd intercepted from Galactic Assembly vessels. They had learned from watching the Watchers, studying every scan, every transmission, every careless moment when the observers thought no one was paying attention. And they had built something that would make the galaxy stop and stare. "Captain, we're picking up additional signatures," Jasper announced, his voice rising with barely contained excitement. "Multiple vessels emerging from stealth protocols. I'm counting 37, no, 42, still more coming online. They're broadcasting friendly identification codes. On the main view screen, markers began appearing as ship after ship revealed itself. Cruisers, destroyers, carriers, support vessels, each one representing years of secret construction and untold resources poured into a single desperate gamble. They had all been hidden, scattered across the solar system, waiting for this moment. But they weren't the real message. Open a channel to the fleet, Raven commanded. All vessels, this is Prometheus. Commence Operation Daybreak. Show them what we've built. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from the depths of the Kuiper Belt, something began to move. The ice and rock that had hidden it for the past 3 years started to drift away, revealing what lay beneath. The object was so large that at first, the sensors struggled to comprehend its dimensions. It emerged slowly, deliberately, like an ancient creature waking from hibernation. The TCS Leviathan was 19 kilometers long and 3 kilometers wide at its broadest point. Its hull was constructed from metamaterials that could shift density and composition on command, armored with layers of reactive shielding that made it nearly impervious to conventional weapons. Along its flanks, hundreds of weapon ports gaped like the eyes of some mechanical beast, each one capable of unleashing destruction on a scale that would have been unthinkable just a generation ago. But it wasn't just a weapon. It was a statement, a declaration carved in steel and energy that humanity was done being watched, done being judged, done waiting for permission to exist. On the bridge of the Prometheus, every officer stood transfixed as the Leviathan revealed itself. Even Raven, who had seen the construction reports and knew every specification, felt her breath catch in her throat. It was one thing to read numbers on a screen. It was another to see it with your own eyes, to understand the sheer scale of what humanity had accomplished. All stations reporting ready, Captain, Sienna said quietly. The Leviathan is fully operational. Admiral Takashi sends his compliments and reports that all systems are green. Raven nodded slowly. Admiral Hiroshi Takashi was the oldest serving officer in the Terran Defense Force, a man who had fought in the resource wars and lived through the dark decades when humanity had nearly torn itself apart. He had been chosen to command the Leviathan not just for his tactical brilliance but because he understood what this moment meant. This wasn't about conquest or domination. It was about survival, about proving that humanity deserved a place among the stars. Jasper, are we receiving any response from the monitoring station? Raven asked. The young lieutenant checked his displays, then nodded. Yes, Captain. They're transmitting on multiple frequencies now. Emergency channels, priority alerts, I think we've definitely gotten their attention. They're also scanning us with everything they have. Some of those frequencies are so high energy they're probably damaging their own equipment. Let them look. Dimitri, set course for the assembly border. Standard approach speed. We're not sneaking anymore. Aye, Captain. Course laid in. We'll reach the border in 72 hours at current velocity. 72 hours. 3 days until humanity officially announced itself to the galaxy. 3 days until everything changed. Raven returned to her chair and activated the ship-wide communication system. Her voice would be heard on every vessel in the fleet, from the smallest patrol craft to the massive Leviathan itself. This is Captain Blackwood to all Terran forces. We are about to do something that has never been done before. We are going to walk up to the most powerful civilization in the galaxy and tell them that we exist, that we matter, and that we will not be ignored. Some of you are scared. That's good. Fear keeps you sharp. Some of you are angry about the centuries of observation without contact. That's understandable. But remember this. We are not going out there to start a war. We are going there to prevent one. We are showing them that humanity is strong enough to defend itself, organized enough to build wonders, and brave enough to face the unknown. Whatever happens in the next 72 hours, know that you are part of history. You are the generation that brought humanity to the stars. She closed the channel and sat back, feeling the weight of command settle more heavily on her shoulders. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, each person focused on their duties. They were professionals, trained for this moment, but she could see the tension in their movements, hear it in the clipped precision of their reports. Somewhere in the darkness, the Velari observers were frantically transmitting reports to their superiors. Somewhere beyond that, in the vast territories of the Galactic Assembly, ancient beings who had ruled the cosmos for millennia were learning that their careful plans had just been shattered by a species they had dismissed as primitives. The message had been sent. Now they would see how the galaxy responded. The Emergency Council chamber on Valoris Prime, the heart of the Galactic Assembly, had not been used in over 4,000 years. The last time these particular doors had opened was during the Krell invasion, when a species from beyond the galactic rim had attempted to consume all sentient life in a wave of unstoppable hunger. That crisis had united the Assembly in a way nothing had before or since. Now, as representatives from 237 species gathered in the vast circular hall, there was a palpable sense that history was about to repeat itself, though no one quite understood how or why. High Chancellor Vorn Kelthus of the Etherian Concordat called the session to order, his 4 arms raised in the traditional gesture of assembly. He was ancient even by Etherian standards, his crystalline body showing the characteristic dimming that came with extreme age. When light passed through him, it refracted into patterns that spoke of wisdom earned through 23 centuries of service. His voice, when he spoke, resonated through the chamber with harmonics that could be heard and felt simultaneously. We gather under dire circumstances, Vorn began, his primary eyes sweeping across the assembled delegates. 3 cycles ago, the species we have designated as Category 7 emerging civilization, commonly known as humanity, revealed military capabilities that exceed our most pessimistic projections by a factor of 73. Our observers report that they have constructed a vessel of Titan-class proportions, supported by a fleet that suggests military organization and industrial capacity we did not know they possessed. A ripple of alarm spread through the chamber. Titan-class vessels were theoretical constructs in most civilizations' military planning, ships so large and resource-intensive that only the oldest and wealthiest species could even contemplate building them. The fact that humanity, a species barely 300 years past nuclear fission, had built one was impossible. Yet the censored data did not lie. From the Draker delegation, War Master Krell Thornscale rose to his full 3 meters, his scales shifting from deep green to aggressive red. The Draker were warriors by nature and culture, a species that had conquered 47 star systems before joining the Assembly and accepting the peace accords. Krell himself bore the scars of 200 battles, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had never lost a war. This is what comes from observation without intervention, Krell growled, his double-jointed jaw making the words sound like controlled violence. We should have contacted them decades ago, established our dominance, brought them into the fold under proper supervision. Instead, we allowed them to grow wild and untamed. Now they approach our borders with a weapon that could threaten entire sectors, and we have no understanding of their intentions or capabilities. The preservation protocol exists for good reason, countered Ambassador Litharis of the Mindweaver Collective, her telepathic voice echoing in the minds of everyone present. The Mindweavers were pacifists, beings of pure thought who had transcended physical form 3 million years ago. To them, violence was not just undesirable but incomprehensible. We do not interfere because emerging species must develop naturally, must learn their own lessons. Forced contact creates dependency or rebellion. The humans have proven their resilience by surviving this long. Perhaps we should consider that they have earned the right to approach us as equals. Equals? Krell's roar echoed through the chamber. They are infants playing with fusion cores. One species, barely unified, with no understanding of galactic law or diplomatic protocol. And you would grant them equal status with civilizations that have existed for millions of years? The preservation protocol does not specify a timeline, Litharis replied calmly. It specifies capability and stability. If humanity has achieved both, then the protocol is satisfied. High Chancellor Vorn raised his arms again, calling for order. The debate over protocol can wait. We must first understand what we are dealing with. Observer Nerith of the Velari, you have monitored humanity longer than anyone. Explain to this council how we missed this development. From a side chamber, a figure emerged who seemed to be composed of living shadow and starlight. The Velari were observers by nature, a species that had evolved in the darkness between stars and had perfected the art of watching without being seen. Nerith had spent 600 years at his post, and the weight of that vigil showed in the dimness of his luminescent core. High Chancellor, esteemed delegates, Nerith began, his voice like wine through empty corridors. We did not miss this development. We observed it. Every transmission, every construction project, every test firing was documented and reported. The problem is not that humanity hid their progress from us. The problem is that we did not believe our own data. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. Explain, Vorn demanded. Nerith gestured, and holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing decades of reports. Humanity's technological advancement has followed an exponential curve that defies standard models. Most species develop linearly, with predictable stages. Humanity's development has been erratic, marked by sudden leaps followed by periods of apparent stagnation. We attributed this to their fractured political structure and tendency toward self-destruction. We assumed they would collapse before reaching the critical threshold. But they did not collapse, Vorn stated. No. Instead, they unified. Not through conquest or cultural absorption, but through collective crisis. The resource wars of the early 22nd century nearly destroyed them. 15 billion dead, entire regions rendered uninhabitable, their homeworld pushed to the brink of ecological collapse. By every model we have, they should have fallen into permanent decline or extinction. Instead, they emerged stronger. They established a planetary government, began serious colonization of their solar system, and most critically, they learned to work together despite their differences. On the displays, images showed the transformation of Earth from a world scarred by war to a thriving hub of industry and culture. Massive orbital platforms harvested solar energy. Colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter provided resources and living space. The asteroid belt had been converted into an industrial complex that rivaled the output of some assembly member worlds. We also underestimated their ability to reverse engineer technology, Nerith continued. Approximately 150 years ago, a Caltraxian merchant vessel suffered a containment failure near human space. The ship was destroyed, but debris spread across 3 astronomical units. Humanity recovered that debris. We detected the salvage operations but assumed they would gain nothing useful from fragments of advanced technology. We were wrong. More images appeared, showing human scientists studying alien materials, running tests, slowly unraveling the principles behind faster-than-light communication, energy shielding, and matter compression. It had taken them 70 years, but they had done it. They had looked at technology thousands of years more advanced than their own and systematically figured out how it worked. They should not have been capable of this, muttered Counselor Rex of the Plutonian Consensus, his methane-breathing form sealed within an environmental suit. Standard development curves suggest they would need at least another 3 centuries to reach this level. Human development does not follow standard curves, Nerith replied. That is precisely the point. They are unpredictable. They survive what should kill them. They solve problems that should be beyond their capacity. And they do it through a combination of creativity, stubbornness, and what they call desperation breeding innovation. War Master Krell leaned forward, his predatory instincts clearly engaged. You speak as if you admire them. I respect them, Nerith corrected. There is a difference. In 600 years of observation, I have watched them face extinction-level events on average every 37 years. Asteroid impacts, pandemics, nuclear near-misses, ecological disasters, artificial intelligence uprisings, and they survive every time. Not through superior technology or divine intervention, but through sheer determination to continue existing. They are survivors on a level we rarely see. And now these survivors are approaching our borders with a warship, Vorn said quietly. The question before this council is simple. How do we respond? We destroy them, Krell said immediately. We send the assembly fleet to intercept. We demonstrate that threatening our borders carries consequences. We remind them that we have held the galaxy for 15,000 years, and we do not yield to upstarts, no matter how impressive their engineering. That would be genocide, Litharus protested. They have made no aggressive moves. They have issued no demands. They are simply approaching, which is their right as a spacefaring species. They are approaching with a Titan-Class warship, Krell shot back. That is an aggressive move by definition. Or it is protection, countered Ambassador Fincoris of the Harmonic Union. The Harmonics were traders and merchants, a species that had built their civilization on commerce rather than conquest. Fun was old and fat by his species standards, his 4 eyes constantly calculating profit margins even in the midst of crisis. Consider their perspective. They have known for centuries that we watch them. They have known that we judge them. They have known that we possess technology and power far beyond their own. How else should they approach us except from a position of strength? Would you walk unarmed into a negotiation with someone who could destroy you with a thought? The human vessel has transmitted a message, Nereth added, activating another holographic display. It has been broadcasting continuously since they revealed themselves. Perhaps the council should hear it. The display flickered, and a human face appeared. She was not young, with silver streaking through her dark hair and a cybernetic implant where her left eye should have been. When she spoke, her voice was firm but not hostile, the tone of someone stating facts rather than making threats. This is Captain Raven Blackwood of the Terran Confederation ship Prometheus, broadcasting on behalf of the United Terran Defense Force. For 300 years, your observers have watched us from the shadows. You have seen our wars, our mistakes, our failures. You have judged us unworthy of contact, and perhaps you were right. We were not ready. But we are ready now. We come not as supplicants begging for acceptance, nor as conquerors seeking dominion. We come as equals, as fellow travelers in this vast universe, as beings who have earned the right to exist among the stars through survival, adaptation, and growth. We ask for dialogue. We offer cooperation. But we will not be ignored, and we will not be dismissed. We hope that wisdom prevails over fear, that curiosity triumphs over prejudice. But whatever your decision, know this: humanity is here, and we will not fade quietly into the darkness. We are the species that looked at an uncaring universe and decided to care anyway. We are the ones who fell and rose and fell again and kept rising. We are survivors. And we are done apologizing for existing. The message ended. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Finally, High Chancellor Vorn spoke. We have 72 hours before they reach our borders. In that time, this council must decide how the Galactic Assembly will respond to humanity's arrival. We will reconvene in 6 hours to begin formal deliberations. Until then, I suggest we all consider very carefully what kind of galaxy we wish to live in. One that welcomes new voices, or one that silences them out of fear. As the delegates began to file out, War Master Krell found himself standing next to Observer Nereth. The massive warrior looked down at the shadow being and asked quietly, "Do you truly believe they are ready?" Nereth was silent for a moment before answering. "I believe they are dangerous. I believe they are unpredictable. I believe they could disrupt the careful balance we have maintained for millennia." He paused. "I also believe that asking whether they are ready is the wrong question. The right question is whether we are ready for them." Krell grunted and walked away, his mind already planning military contingencies. But as he left, he could not shake the image of that human captain, standing before the assembled might of the galaxy and refusing to blink. Perhaps, he thought, this would be more interesting than he had anticipated. The final hours before contact felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that the next step would either lead to flight or a fatal fall. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Raven Blackwood watched the countdown timer with the kind of steady calm that came from accepting that some moments were beyond your control. 72 hours had passed since humanity had revealed itself to the galaxy. Now, at the invisible boundary where human space ended and the Galactic Assembly's domain began, two civilizations were about to meet face to face for the first time. "Captain, we're receiving multiple signals," Lieutenant Jasper Kane reported, his voice tight with controlled tension. "I count over 300 vessels holding position just beyond the border. Everything from scout ships to what my database is classifying as capital-class dreadnoughts. They've formed a defensive perimeter, but they're not advancing." Raven nodded slowly. She had expected this. The galaxy was afraid, and fear made even the most advanced civilizations do predictable things. They had brought overwhelming force to demonstrate their power, to remind humanity that despite their impressive ship, they were still vastly outnumbered. It was posturing, the kind of display that preceded either violence or negotiation. "What about the Leviathan?" she asked. "Admiral Takashi reports all systems nominal," replied Lieutenant Commander Sienna Cross from Tactical. "He's holding position exactly 10,000 kilometers behind us, as ordered. The rest of our fleet is maintaining formation. We're showing strength, but we're not being aggressive." "Good. That's exactly what we need them to see. We're not backing down, but we're not picking a fight either." Raven stood and walked to the observation window, her reflection ghostly against the backdrop of stars. Out there, hundreds of alien ships waited, each one representing a civilization that had existed for centuries or millennia longer than humanity. Each one crewed by beings who probably saw humans as dangerous children playing with weapons they didn't understand. Maybe they were right. Maybe humanity was overreaching, stepping into a galaxy that didn't want them and wasn't ready for them. But Raven had learned long ago that waiting for permission to exist was just another form of surrender. "Captain, we're being hailed," Jasper announced. "It's coming from one of the larger vessels at the center of their formation. Audio and visual. They're requesting direct communication with our commanding officer." This was it. The moment that would determine whether humanity's bold gamble would lead to peace or war. Raven took a deep breath, straightened her uniform, and returned to her chair. Around her, every member of the bridge crew had stopped their tasks to watch. They knew what this meant. History was about to be made, one way or another. "Put them through," Raven commanded. The main view screen flickered, and for the first time in human history, humans and aliens looked at each other directly, knowingly, officially. The being on the screen was unlike anything Raven had imagined. High Chancellor Vorn Kelthus appeared to be made of living crystal, his body refracting light into patterns that hurt to look at directly. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, resonating through the bridge in a way that made Raven's bones vibrate. "I am High Chancellor Vorn Kelthus, speaking for the Galactic Assembly. You have entered the territorial boundaries established by treaty and custom that predate your species' emergence as sentient beings. State your purpose." Raven met his gaze, or what she assumed was his gaze, with unflinching directness. "I am Captain Raven Blackwood of the Terran Confederation. We are here because we exist, and existence demands acknowledgement. You have watched us for 300 years. You have studied us, judged us, and found us wanting. We come now to tell you that your judgment no longer matters. We have proven ourselves to ourselves, and that is enough." A ripple seemed to pass through Vorn's crystalline body, patterns of light shifting in ways that might have indicated surprise or anger or something humans had no name for. "You speak with remarkable arrogance for a species that has barely left its birth system. Do you understand what you risk by approaching us in this manner? Do you comprehend the forces arrayed against you?" "We understand perfectly," Raven replied. We understand that you could destroy us if you chose to. We understand that your technology exceeds ours, that your civilizations are older than our recorded history, that by any objective measure, we are insignificant in the grand scale of galactic civilization. But we also understand something that perhaps you have forgotten. Power means nothing if you're too afraid to live. Afraid? Vorn's voice carried harmonics that might have been amusement. You believe we are afraid of you? I believe you're afraid of what we represent, Raven said. We're the species that refuses to die. We've faced extinction more times than I can count, and we're still here. We don't have your technology or your wisdom or your age, but we have something you might have lost somewhere in your millions of years of existence. We have the absolute conviction that tomorrow is worth fighting for, even when today looks impossible. The screen split, and another face appeared. Warmaster Krell Thornscale, with his predatory eyes and battle-scarred scales, leaned forward with obvious interest. It's a fact, Raven responded. We didn't build the Leviathan because we want war. We built it because we've learned that peace only works when everyone at the table knows that violence would be too costly for anyone to win. You've maintained your galactic order for 15,000 years. That's impressive. But how much of that peace came from understanding and cooperation, and how much came from the fact that you were so powerful that no one dared challenge you? A third voice joined the conversation, this one not spoken but felt directly in Raven's mind. Ambassador Litherus of the Mindweaver Collective, her telepathic presence gentle but undeniable. You question the foundation of our civilization, yet you know nothing of how we have suffered to build it. You have survived wars that killed millions. We have survived wars that sterilized entire sectors of space, that rendered thousands of worlds uninhabitable. We learned, through unimaginable pain, that unity and cooperation were the only alternatives to annihilation. Do not presume to lecture us on the cost of peace. Raven felt the weight of those words, the depth of experience behind them. These beings had lived through horrors that humanity could barely imagine, and they had emerged with a functioning civilization that had kept the peace for longer than humans had existed. Who was she to question their methods? But then she thought of Earth, of the resource wars and the billions who had died, of the moment when humanity had stood on the brink and chosen to step back. She thought of her own lost eye, sacrificed in a battle to save colonists who weren't even from her nation or culture. She thought of every person on every ship in the human fleet, each one carrying their own scars and their own reasons for being here. You're right, Raven said quietly. We don't know what you've endured. We can't possibly understand the weight of 15,000 years of history. But we know our own history. We know what it cost us to survive. And we know that we did it without guidance, without help, without anyone to show us the way. You watched us struggle and fall and rise again, and you did nothing. Not because you were cruel, but because you believed we needed to find our own path. Well, we found it. And now we're here, standing at your door, telling you that we're ready to walk beside you instead of behind you. High Chancellor Vorn was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed, the harmonics shifting to something that might have been respect. You are correct about one thing, Captain Blackwood. We are afraid. Not of your weapons or your ship, impressive as they are. We are afraid of what your presence means. For 15,000 years, we have been the shepherds of this galaxy. We have guided emerging species, protected them from threats they could not imagine, maintained the order that allows life to flourish. If we acknowledge you as equals, if we admit that you have earned your place through your own efforts rather than our guidance, then we must question everything we have built. We must ask whether our role as caretakers has been help or hindrance. Maybe it's been both, Raven suggested. Maybe there's no perfect answer. Maybe some species need guidance, and others need to find their own way. We're not here to tear down what you've built. We're here to add our voice to the conversation, to bring our perspective and our experience. We've made mistakes that cost us dearly. Those mistakes taught us things you might never have learned because you were too wise to make them in the first place. From somewhere off-screen, Raven heard a sound that might have been laughter. Then another voice spoke, one she hadn't heard before. The human makes an interesting point. Observer Nereth appeared on screen, his form of shadow and starlight somehow conveying warmth despite its alien nature. I have watched humanity for 600 years. I have seen them fail and succeed in equal measure. What strikes me most is not their resilience, though that is remarkable. It is their capacity for change. They learn from their mistakes faster than any species I have observed. They adapt, they evolve, they refuse to be bound by what they were yesterday. Perhaps that is what we need. Not another ancient voice speaking from the weight of millennia, but a young voice reminding us that change is not just possible but necessary. War Master Krell growled, but there was less hostility in the sound than before. You would have us welcome them simply because they are different? I would have us welcome them because excluding them serves no purpose except to feed our own fear, Nereth replied. They are here. They exist. They have built wonders despite every obstacle. We can either acknowledge that and work with them, or we can try to suppress them and create an enemy where none needed to exist. The screen went dark for a moment as the alien delegates conferred privately. Raven used the time to check in with her crew. Dimitri at the helm gave her a thumbs up. Sienna reported that weapon systems remained on standby but non-threatening. Jasper was monitoring communications from the human fleet, all ships reporting ready but calm. They had done everything right. Now they had to wait and see if it was enough. When the screen reactivated, High Chancellor Vorn appeared alone. The patterns in his crystalline body moved slowly, contemplatively. Captain Blackwood, the Galactic Assembly has reached a preliminary decision. We will not grant you immediate membership, as our laws require observation periods and cultural integration protocols that cannot be bypassed. However, we acknowledge your presence and your right to exist as a sovereign civilization. We propose a probationary status, a period of mutual learning and cooperation that will last for one standard galactic cycle, approximately 25 of your Earth years. During this time, you will have access to certain technologies and trade opportunities. You will be expected to abide by basic galactic laws. And you will be judged not by what you were, but by what you choose to become. Raven felt something release in her chest, a tension she hadn't fully realized she was carrying. This wasn't everything humanity had hoped for, but it was enough. It was recognition. It was a chance. It was the beginning of something that could grow into true partnership. We accept, Raven said. And we thank you for your wisdom in choosing dialogue over conflict. Do not thank us yet, Vorn replied, and there might have been something like humor in his voice. You will find that being part of the galactic community comes with complications you cannot imagine. There will be species that resent you, that fear you, that seek to exploit or undermine you. The path ahead will not be easy. If it was easy, Raven said with a slight smile, we wouldn't be interested. Humanity has never been good at taking the simple path. We prefer the one where we have to work for every step forward, where we earn what we receive, where we prove ourselves through action rather than promises. Then I suspect, Vorn said, that you will fit into this galaxy better than any of us expected. Welcome, humanity. Welcome to the larger universe. May you find it as challenging and rewarding as we have. The transmission ended. For a moment, the bridge of the Prometheus was completely silent. Then Dimitri let out a whoop of joy that broke the tension, and suddenly everyone was talking at once, laughing and crying and embracing. They had done it. Against all odds, against the accumulated wisdom and power of 237 species, humanity had stood firm and earned its place among the stars. Raven allowed herself a moment to feel the victory, to let the relief wash over her. Then she activated the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Blackwood. Stand down from combat readiness but maintain alert status. Diplomatic protocols are now in effect. We've just taken the first step on a very long journey, and I need everyone sharp and professional as we figure out what comes next. Admiral Takashi, prepare the Leviathan for inspection tours. They're going to want to see what we've built. Let's show them that humanity doesn't do anything halfway. As her crew worked to implement the new orders, Raven returned to the observation window. Out there, the alien fleet was beginning to disperse, ships moving to new positions that suggested escort rather than confrontation. Somewhere among those vessels were beings who would become allies, perhaps even friends. And somewhere were beings who would remain suspicious or hostile, who would test humanity's resolve at every opportunity. That was fine. Humanity had been tested before. They had survived wars and plagues and disasters. They had looked at an impossible future and decided to make it possible anyway. This was just another challenge, another mountain to climb, another reason to prove that giving up was never an option. Behind her, Jasper spoke softly. "Captain, I'm receiving a private message on one of the encrypted channels we set up. It's from Observer Nerith. He says welcome home, and that he's glad he lived long enough to say it." Raven smiled, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Welcome home. As if humanity had always been meant to be here, among the stars, part of something larger than themselves. Maybe they had been. Maybe every species that survived long enough earned the right to reach beyond their birth world and find their place in the cosmic family. Or maybe humanity was just too stubborn to accept any other outcome. Either way, they were here now. And the galaxy would never be quite the same.